Don't go in. A homeless girl yells in hospital. What she reveals leaves the CEO speechless. The girl's scream sliced through the sterile silence of the hospital like a blade. Don't go in, she cried, her voice raw, her arms outstretched, blocking the frail old man from entering room 417. He froze, startled. A nurse turned, and so did a man in an expensive suit standing by the reception desk. Richard Kane, CEO of Medway Hospitals. No one knew who the girl was. She looked no older than 17, barefoot, wrapped in an oversized hoodie and trembling like a leaf in a storm. But something in her eyes, desperation mixed with truth, stopped Richard mid-step. The old man, Walter Green, didn't understand. Why can't I go in, sweetheart? My wife's waiting for me. The girl shook her head fiercely, tears now spilling freely. She's gone, sir. That woman in there. That's not your wife. They're lying to you. A hush fell over the lobby. A security guard approached, but Richard raised a hand. Wait, he said. His tone didn't waver, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed his unease. This girl had just accused his hospital as legacy of deception, and Walter Green was no ordinary patient. He was a World War II veteran, a retired math teacher, and a man with no known family left. Or so the files said. I know this man, the girl whispered, stepping closer to Walter, who looked utterly lost. He used to come to the soup kitchen every Friday. He called me Pumpkin. He told me stories about Eleanor's wife, who died 10 years ago. Walter blinked. Pumpkin. His voice cracked. Only one person ever called me that. The nurse looked uneasy now. She glanced back toward room 417. Mr. Kane, perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere private. No, Richard said. We do it here. Something inside him, buried beneath boardrooms and bottom lines, stirred. Maybe it was the way the girl clutched Walter's trembling hand. Maybe it was the crack in Walter's voice. Maybe it was guilt, years of silent compromises catching up to him in a single moment. The girl turned to him. I can prove it. 2 weeks earlier. Rain hit the roof of the abandoned shelter like a million tiny fists. The girl huddled in the corner, her hoodie soaked, her stomach cramping from hunger. Her name was Lily, though no one in the city knew it. Not really. On the streets, you lost your name fast. But she remembered Walter. The old man with shaky hands and a voice like a bedtime story. He always gave her half his sandwich. You're too young to go hungry, he'd say. And I'm too old to eat alone. She'd laughed once, and he'd smiled so wide she saw what he must have looked like when he was young. Then one Friday, he stopped coming. Gone. Just like that. And now she was here, 3 bus rides later, standing in a hospital lobby she never thought she'd enter because someone told her an old man who looked like Walter had been brought in for memory loss. Said he was confused. Said he had no family. She knew better. Back in the present, Walter stood frozen. If Eleanor's gone, then who? Lily reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a photo wrinkled and soft at the corners. Walter and a younger version of her, sitting on a park bench. She'd drawn a heart around their heads once, as a joke. He took the photo, fingers shaking. His knees buckled. Richard caught him. What the hell is happening? The CEO murmured, stunned. Lily looked up at him with fury and pain. You people stuck him in a ward with a stranger, told him lies, and we're going to sign papers to take his house. He's not a nobody. He's mine. He's family. Richard's mouth opened, but no words came. This was not part of the system. This was a crack in the machine. And from that crack, something real was breaking through. Walter sat on the edge of the hospital bed, the photo still trembling in his hand. His eyes scanned it over and over, as if trying to make the memory reappear through sheer will. This was in Washington Square, he murmured. You were wearing that silly orange hat. Lily wiped her cheek. Yeah, the one with the flaps. You said I looked like a carrot. You hated that. I hated how much I loved it, she whispered. Richard stood just outside the room, arms crossed, face stony. The nurse Sandra hovered near the door, avoiding his eye. I want her name, he said quietly. Sandra swallowed. She's not in our system. She just showed up. Security thought she was here to cause trouble. Richard didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence burned hotter than words. Inside, Walter set the photo on his lap. I thought you left, he said. You stopped coming. I figured you were gone. I got sick, Lily admitted. And scared. I stayed with a group down by the docks. But I thought of you every single day. The room was quiet. The machines hummed. The city outside the window went on, indifferent and busy. But inside this room, time had slowed. Richard finally stepped in. "Mr. Green," he began, measured and professional. "You've been under our care for 3 weeks. You were found wandering near 12th in Maine. No ID. You kept repeating your wife's name. Our team assumed." Walter cut him off. "You assumed wrong." Richard's jaw clenched. There was no foul intention. The goal was stabilization and support. "You were confused." "No," Walter said. "I was grieving." Lily stood. "You were grieving every Friday when we sat on that bench and talked about Eleanor. But you were never confused. He remembers everything, you just didn't bother to ask." Richard looked between them. Then why did he believe the woman in room 417 was his wife? Walter stared at the floor. Because they gave her Eleanor's perfume." The words hit like a slap. "I knew it wasn't her. I knew," he whispered, as if ashamed. "But the smell, the way she smiled, my mind wanted it. Just for a moment, I wanted to believe I wasn't alone anymore." Lily reached for his hand. Richard turned to Sandra. "Is that true?" She hesitated. "We used certain sensory cues to ease transitions. We didn't." "You programmed him," Lily spat. "You manipulated his grief." Richard had no rebuttal. Later that day, Richard sat in his office, staring at the city skyline. His assistant knocked, holding a folder. "Financials for the Elder Continuity Program," she said. "Q3 projections show." "Set them down," he said. She hesitated. "Sir, the press has been calling. Something about a homeless girl and a decorated veteran. Apparently, someone filmed the confrontation in the lobby." "Of course they did." She set the folder down and left. Richard waited a moment, then opened the top drawer of his desk. Inside, buried beneath policies and reports, was a photograph. A man in uniform, a woman in a nurse's cap, his father and mother. He stared at it, as if it held an answer. Then he picked up the phone. "Get me legal, then get me housing. I want to know where she's staying." The girl. That night, Lily sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, a tray of untouched food in front of her. She hadn't eaten in hours. She couldn't. Her stomach was twisted in knots. Walter was asleep upstairs. They'd agreed to let her stay the night in the family lounge, even though she wasn't technically family. Not yet. But Richard hadn't come back. She didn't trust him, not even a little. Her eyes scanned the room. Nurses chatted. Janitors swept. Everything felt fake. Too clean. Too shiny. This place didn't feel like healing. It felt like control. And yet, Walter was here. And he was alive. That had to count for something. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. A soft voice startled her. "You saved him." She looked up. Sandra, the nurse. Her tone was gentle, unsure. "I didn't save him," Lily said. "I just stopped them from erasing him." Sandra nodded slowly. "You know, a lot of these patients, they don't have anyone. No visitors. No family. We tell ourselves we're doing good, but maybe we've stopped seeing them." Lily didn't answer. Sandra pulled something from her pocket. A keycard. She slid it across the table. "Room 410 is empty. Couch folds out. It's yours tonight." Lily blinked. "Why?" "Because when I was 16, someone did the same for me." Lily stared at the card. She took it. The next morning, Lily found Richard Kane waiting for her in the hallway outside room 410. He was in a crisp navy suit, coffee in hand, eyes tired. "I had the room swept for cameras. No one's watching," he said. "Good," Lily replied. "Because I've got words." He raised an eyebrow. "Before you tear me apart, let me ask you something." She crossed her arms. "Where's your family?" Lily didn't flinch. "Dead. Or as good as. You lived on the street. You dropped out of school. You're 17. Why didn't you take a bed in a shelter?" "Because they separate you from people like Walter." Richard nodded slowly. "Then let me offer you something different." Lily rolled her eyes. "This is the part where the rich guy saves the poor girl?" "No," he said. "This is the part where I ask you to work for me." She blinked. "What?" "I run a system that's broken. And I've had too many yes people and not enough truth. You walked in here with nothing, and you reminded me what this place is supposed to be. I want you to consult. Informally. Help us track the human side of care. You want me to be your conscience?" "Exactly." Lily shook her head. "That's insane." "It's also real. You'd get housing. Safety. Walter would stay here until we find long-term care that doesn't feel like a prison. And you'd be involved." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Why? He sipped his coffee. Because I watched my father die in a place like this. And I didn't speak up. 3 days later, a press conference was held on the front steps of Medway Memorial. Richard Kane stood before cameras, with Walter seated in a wheelchair beside him and Lily at his left. Today, Richard began, we acknowledge a failing not just of a system, but of compassion. Mr. Walter Green was nearly institutionalized without dignity. Miss Lily Hart risked her safety to speak truth. From this moment forward, Medway will launch the Compassion First initiative, aimed at redefining elder care and honoring every life story, no matter how forgotten. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. But all Lily saw was Walter's smile, the kind that made her feel like home. After the press conference, the hospital buzzed with attention. Lily couldn't walk 10 feet without someone calling her the girl from the news. Nurses nodded at her. Doctors smiled politely. Volunteers whispered behind clipboards. But none of it felt real to her. What did feel real was Walter's hand in hers as she pushed his wheelchair down the sunlit corridor toward the hospital garden. You okay, Pumpkin? He asked, glancing up at her. She smiled softly. I should be asking you that. I'm fine, he said. Better than fine, actually. That garden out there's been calling my name for days. They reached the double doors, and Lily pushed them open. The garden stretched before them in neat rows and winding paths, with patches of color blooming in every direction: roses, tulips, wildflowers, and lavender. It was too perfect for a place so heavy with pain. They found a bench near the fountain. Walter breathed in deep. This smells like the world I remember, he said. Lily sat beside him. Do you think it's really going to change, Walt? Everything, Richard said. The Compassion First thing. Was it all just for cameras? Walter looked at her. His eyes, once dim, now held sparks again. I don't know, but I think he meant it. Sometimes, people surprise you. She exhaled slowly. I'm not used to people surprising me in a good way. Meanwhile, Richard Kane wasn't sitting still. In the days following the press conference, he had meetings back-to-back: legal, media, internal ethics committees. But there was one conversation he'd been avoiding. Until now. He sat in the boardroom at Medway HQ with 6 other executives, each of them older, polished, and armed with spreadsheets. You want to make feelings a metric, said Lawrence Kim, CFO. Empathy isn't quantifiable. No, Richard said. But dignity is. So is time spent with each patient. So is their emotional feedback. You're suggesting we shift funds from treatment capacity to patient experience. I'm suggesting we shift from treating bodies to caring for people. There was silence. Then a voice spoke, measured and cold. You're doing this because a homeless girl embarrassed you on camera. Richard looked at Evelyn Hartman, head of policy. I'm doing this because that homeless girl showed more humanity than anyone in this room. Evelyn folded her arms. And you think that's scalable? I think it has to be. Lawrence leaned forward. We have investors to answer to, Richard. This hospital's value doesn't lie in moments of kindness. It lies in data, outcomes, and efficiency. Richard's voice dropped. And how many of those outcomes include people dying alone with no one knowing their name? Silence again. Finally, Evelyn said, you have a PR win. Milk it. But don't burn the house down to feel noble. Richard stood. This is the house burning down. I'm just the one trying to save what matters. That night, Lily sat by Walter's bed. He was sleeping now, his breathing slow but steady. She'd been reading to him from one of his old journals filled with stories about Eleanor, math puzzles he never got to teach, and dreams he'd written down but never chased. She ran her finger across a line on the last page. We don't get to choose how we leave the world, but we can choose who we take with us in our heart. Tears welled up again. She blinked them back. She'd cried enough for a lifetime. The door creaked open. It was Richard. You're working late, she said. He stepped in, a folder under one arm. I wanted to show you something. He handed her the folder. Inside was a printed housing application. Her name was typed neatly at the top. Lily Hart. Age, 17. Status, emergency priority. She stared at it. What is this? A place. Yours. Legally. With Walter, if that's what you want. Full guardianship pending. Her voice caught. You're serious? He nodded. It won't be fancy, but it's yours. She didn't know what to say. I also spoke to the local high school. You're only 6 credits short of graduation. They're willing to work with you, especially now that you're a local hero. Lily's face tightened. I'm not a hero. No, he said. But you're the reason one man doesn't have to die forgotten. That counts for something. She looked at him. Why are you really doing this? He sighed. Because I spent 20 years pretending numbers meant more than people. And because, when I saw that man Walter staring at a stranger in that bed, thinking she was his wife, I thought of my mother. Lily's voice softened. What happened to her? She died in a long-term care facility 2 years ago. No visitors allowed. COVID restrictions. I wasn't there. Her last words were to a nurse she didn't know. Lily didn't speak. Richard turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Room 417. We reviewed footage and the records. That woman one we said was Eleanor's scam patient. Part of a group faking identities for end-of-life insurance fraud. Lily's face froze. What? We're working with authorities now. But we almost let her erase the last pieces of Walter's truth. Lily stood slowly, jaw clenched. Then stop calling it a mistake. Call it what it was, cruelty. Days passed. Walter's memory began to sharpen and burst short, vivid recollections that came and went like fireflies. He remembered a poem Eleanor wrote. He forgot Lily's name for 3 hours. Then he remembered how she liked hot chocolate with salt in it. Lily stayed by his side, even as social workers brought forms and counselors began planning for their transition out of the hospital. One afternoon, a young man in a pressed shirt came into the room. Miss Hart. She turned. I'm Tyler Green, he said. Walter's nephew. Lily froze. Wait, what? He smiled sheepishly. I found out about everything from the news. We thought Uncle Walter had died years ago. My dad, his brother, passed, and the family drifted. I saw the press conference, and I couldn't believe it. She stepped back. You're really his family? Tyler nodded. Yeah. I'm sorry it took this long. Walter stirred. Is that Thomas's boy? Tyler stepped forward. Yeah, Uncle Walt. It's me. Walter stared for a long time, and then his face crumpled. I thought you all forgot me. Never, Tyler whispered. We just didn't know where to look. That evening, Lily walked alone down the hospital corridor. She felt displaced. The place that had become her world now had new faces, new names, real family. And she was just Lily again. Nobody. Richard found her sitting by the vending machines. You okay? She didn't answer. He sat beside her. He still wants you. I'm not his blood. Blood doesn't raise you on half sandwiches in a park. She chuckled sadly. I guess not. Tyler's offered to help pay for your place, Richard added. He said Walter insisted. Lily turned to him. I don't know how to be someone. You already are, he said. You're just figuring out what kind. 2 weeks later, Lily stood in her new apartment, modest, clean, warm. A photo of her and Walter sat on the shelf. Her GED books were stacked on the desk. And on the fridge, a single quote Walter had scribbled on a napkin. The world is loud. But listen for the soft voices. They're the ones that matter. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Richard. Board-approved pilot programs. 10 compassion advocates to be hired across our hospitals. You're first on the list. She smiled. Maybe she hadn't just saved one man. Maybe she'd cracked open the door for hundreds more. Lily lingered in her apartment after Richard's message, staring at the words like they might disappear. Board-approved pilot programs. 10 compassion advocates to be hired across our hospitals. You're first on the list. She read it again. Not because she didn't believe it, but because part of her still didn't believe herself. She placed the phone on the counter. The room was quiet. No sirens. No cold benches. No strangers yelling. Just her. Her own space. And yet, the silence felt unfamiliar. A soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Sandra, the nurse who'd once snuck her a key card holding a paper bag. I heard you moved in, Sandra said, smiling. Thought you might need something better than hospital food. Lily blinked. You came all the way here. Sandra shrugged. You changed things. The least I could do was bring dinner. They sat together at the small table, unpacking food containers and paper napkins. I heard about Walter's nephew, Sandra said gently. Lily nodded. He's been visiting a lot. They're catching up. Talking about baseball, his dad, old times. It's good. But it's hard. Lily hesitated, then nodded again. Sandra poured water into 2 cups. You don't have to lose him, Lily. Family doesn't vanish just because new people show up. I know, Lily said. But I'm scared I was just the bridge between then and now. And bridges don't stay. They just get walked across. Sandra shook her head. You were a lifeline. Lifelines don't get forgotten. They get held onto. The food tasted like more than a meal. It tasted like arrival. Back at Medway Memorial, Walter's condition had stabilized. He was sharper now, remembering names and places, finishing stories he had started years ago and abandoned in grief. But time was moving. So was he. He decided, with the help of Tyler and the hospital, to move into a senior co-housing community, one built with dignity and shared lives. Not a facility, a home. Lily visited him on his last night at the hospital. He was packing up a small suitcase with his journals, a framed photo of Eleanor, and a puzzle box they'd worked on together. Got room for one more, she joked. Walter smiled without looking up. For you? Always. She sat down beside him on the edge of the bed. You sure about this? He nodded. I can't live in a hospital forever, but I'll never stop needing people. That's the truth we all avoid. He turned to face her. You gave me more than a second chance. You gave me memory back. You gave me roots again. And you gave me belief, Lily whispered, in something bigger than survival. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. What's this? She asked. It's a letter I wrote to Eleanor. The day I thought I was going to die in here. I never got to send it. I want you to keep it. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. Later that night, she opened it slowly, unfolding the yellowing lines with care. My dearest Eleanor, if you ever get this, it means I made it out of my fog just long enough to remember the sound of your laugh. They try to tell me you're gone. I refuse to believe it. Because people don't vanish when they are loved. They echo. There's a girl here. A spark. Her name is Lily. She's the kind of person you always said would change the world. She has your fight, your truth, and your fire. She's helped me see you again. Not in the way I hoped, but in the way I needed. If this is goodbye, let it be soft. Let it be bright. And let it carry us both into whatever comes next. Love always. Walter. Lily pressed the letter to her chest. She didn't cry. She just let herself feel whole. 2 months later, Medway Memorial was unrecognizable. Not in architecture or technology, but in tone. Gone were the fluorescent-lit waiting rooms filled with forgotten seniors parked in wheelchairs. Gone were the clipped voices of overworked nurses speaking to patients like problems to be solved. In their place came something. Slower. Warmer. The hospital had launched its pilot program, Compassion Advocates, with Lily Hart as the first official recruit. Her job? To listen, to speak up for those without family, to catch what charts missed. The position was met with skepticism at first, but stories quickly spread. She sat with a man named Carl whose only visitor was a stuffed bear. She helped translate for a nonverbal woman no one had realized was fluent in sign language. She caught a mix-up in an elderly woman's medication before it caused a stroke. But more than that, she witnessed people. She remembered names. She memorized routines. She made each room a little less lonely. And people noticed. Richard Kane, once the architect of clinical distance, found himself sitting on the edge of patient beds more often. He asked questions that had nothing to do with billing codes. The hospital's culture shifted not through a press release, but through behavior. It rippled. Other hospitals took notice. News outlets did follow-ups not on the scandal, but the results. The story had evolved from a viral confrontation to a case study in human-centered care. One Tuesday afternoon, Lily walked into room 204, a room once assigned to Walter, but now home to another patient, Miss Dolores Jenkins. Dolores had a long, elegant face and silver hair tied in a bun. She was once a jazz singer in Harlem, and she told Lily stories that seemed like movies. They used to call me the Nightingale of 134th Street, Dolores whispered, her voice raspy. Now I can barely hum. I'd still buy your album, Lily replied. Dolores smiled. You got soul, girl. Not many people your age listen with their whole face. But you do. Lily took her hand. You deserve an audience. You are the audience, Dolores said, and closed her eyes peacefully. That night, Lily took the bus home. Her apartment still smelled faintly of paint and lavender, the scent of starting over. On the kitchen counter was a letter in an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single typed page. To Miss Hart, your work has come to our attention not just through the media, but through direct recommendation from Dr. Richard Kane and patients under your care. We are preparing to launch a nationwide initiative focusing on elder dignity and youth advocates. We believe your perspective, experience, and voice are essential. We'd like to invite you to speak at the National Symposium for Health Equity in Boston this fall. Travel and lodging will be covered. Please confirm by August 1st. Sincerely, the Human Dignity Initiative Board. Lily stared at the letter. Her hands shook. It felt impossible, but so had everything else. A week later, Lily returned to the senior co-housing facility where Walter now lived. She hadn't seen him in 2 weeks' busy schedules and conflicting calendars, but she brought with her something important. She found him in the courtyard, watering tomato plants. "You're late," he called out without looking up. She grinned. "I brought something to make up for it." He turned. She handed him a printed flyer. National Symposium for Health Equity featuring speaker, Lily Hart. He adjusted his glasses. "You're speaking at a national summit?" "I guess so," she said quietly. Walter's eyes filled with tears. "You're going to make the world listen, kid." She looked around. "I wouldn't have found my voice without this place. Without you." He patted the bench next to him, and she sat. "You remember what I told you back at the hospital?" he asked. "Which part?" "The part about echoes." She nodded. "Your voice is going to echo for a long time, Lily. Not because you're loud, but because you meant it." At the symposium, Lily stood on a stage before a crowd of medical professionals, policymakers, and hospital CEOs. Her hands were cold, her breath shallow. But she began the way Walter once had with a story. "My name is Lily Hart. I used to sleep on benches outside hospitals because they were the only places with light and security. One night, I broke into a hospital room. I wasn't there to steal anything. I was there to see if the man in the bed would die alone. He thought I was his wife. I let him believe it. That moment, quiet, strange, human, was more important than any policy, protocol, or treatment plan in that building. What he needed wasn't medicine. It was memory, dignity, a witness. I wasn't trained. I wasn't certified. But I was present. And sometimes, that's enough to change a life." It changed mine. The room was silent when she finished. Then it erupted in applause, not polite, performative applause, but something honest. Later that day, a man approached her. His name was Dr. Sebastian Horn, director of a major elder care organization. "I want you to help us build something," he said. "Nationally." Lily hesitated. "I'm only 17. He smiled. "Exactly." 3 years later, Lily stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the Hart Walker Center for Elder Dignity and Youth Advocacy, named for her and Walter, who now served as its honorary director. The center wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a home. It was something new, a space where teenagers could earn school credit and stipends to serve as companions, record keepers, and dignity witnesses for seniors. Each teen was matched with a resident. Each story documented. Each life remembered. Inside the main atrium, a mural stretched from floor to ceiling. It showed a young girl holding the hand of an old man in a hospital gown. Behind them, dozens of shadowed faces, some old, some young, all watching, witnessing. At the bottom of the mural were words painted in gold. "Don't go in, a homeless girl yells in hospital. What she reveals leaves the CEO speechless." Below that, in smaller letters, "What she revealed was the truth. What she left behind was a legacy." Lily visited Walter every Friday. They drank tea, played cards, and argued about crossword puzzles. On one visit, she brought a small velvet box. "I got something for you," she said. Walter raised an eyebrow. "A ring?" She laughed. "No. Better." He opened it. Inside was a pink gold-plated engraved with the words, "First Witness." He held it gently. "I didn't do anything." "You did," she said. "You believed in me before anyone else did." His eyes watered. "I never thought I'd see this world. Not like this." "You built it," she said. "No," he whispered. "We did." Epilogue. In a dusty room in an old wing of Medway Memorial, a box sits on a shelf. Inside, an old journal. A faded hospital badge that reads, "Lily Hart Compassion Advocate." A photo of Walter and Eleanor, now restored and framed. And a single sheet of paper with a typed quote. "Every life, no matter how small or lost, is a universe. Witness it. Remember it. Never let it fade." And beside that, tucked in the corner, a note in Lily's handwriting. "For the next girl who thinks she's invisible. You're not. Not anymore." A few months later, fall painted the trees in shades of rust and gold. The air smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. Lily stood on the lawn of the Hart Walker Center, watching leaves drift like quiet memories to the ground. Inside, teens and elders played chess. wrote poems, listened to jazz on an old record player. One corner was filled with colored pencils and memory books. Another held voice recorders and headphones tools for storytelling. It wasn't loud, but it was alive. She made her rounds slowly, stopping in on Mr. Alston, who was dictating his war letters into a tape recorder. Then Mrs. Reyna, who had just finished painting a mural with her assigned student volunteer, a quiet boy named Mateo, who rarely spoke but had drawn dozens of sons. Back in her small office, Lily sat beside a bulletin board pinned with photos, quotes, and scraps of handwritten notes. One caught her eye, scribbled in fading ink from 3 years ago. "You're not just surviving. You're making the world better, Walter." A knock interrupted her thoughts. A teen poked her head in. Shelby, 15, tough, skeptical, with a shaved undercut and a guarded look that reminded Lily of herself. "Hey," Shelby said. "My match, Mrs. Taft. She won't stop talking about her dog that died in 1972. What am I supposed to say?" Lily smiled. "Ask her what the dog's name was. Then draw a picture of it with her. Doesn't matter how it looks. It'll matter that you listened." Shelby frowned. "Seriously?" "Seriously." Shelby rolled her eyes. "Weird, but okay." As she left, Lily called out, "Shelby?" "Yeah." "She'll remember you long after she forgets everything else." The door closed, and Lily felt it again, that old tug in her chest. Not fear, not sadness, hope. That evening, Lily took the train to the old part of town. She passed boarded-up shops and flickering signs until she arrived at her destination, the same bus bench she once called home. It hadn't changed much, but she had. She sat down, letting the cold metal touch her back. In her hands was a bag of sandwiches and a thermos of tea. Eventually, a man in a tattered coat sat nearby. Hollow cheeks, wide eyes, restless hands. She offered him a sandwich. He blinked, then took it. "You a social worker or something?" he asked. "No," she said. "Just someone who knows what it's like." He looked at her again, more curious now. "You used to be out here?" She nodded. "What changed?" She paused, then looked him in the eye. "I stopped being invisible." He chewed in silence, then whispered, "You look like someone who made it." She didn't say anything. Instead, she poured him a cup of tea, handed it to him gently, and simply stayed. No camera crews, no press, just presence. Back at the Heart Walker Center, a new group of volunteers were starting orientation. They sat in a circle, holding folders and notepads, awkward and unsure. Lily stepped into the room. She no longer wore oversized hoodies or torn jeans. She wore a navy blazer, a bracelet made from hospital tags, and a pin that read "Witness." She greeted them all with a smile. "You're here because you think old people matter," she began. "You're here because someone told you your time is valuable. And you're here because the world is better when we remember each other." She glanced at the board behind her. A single word was written across it in bold letters. Dignity. She tapped the word once, gently. This isn't a job. It's a vow. To never let anyone vanish quietly. To say with your presence, "I see you. I remember you. You still matter." She saw their eyes light up, some nervous, some excited, some skeptical. One boy raised his hand. "What if we mess up? What if we don't know what to say?" Lily chuckled softly. "You don't have to say anything perfect. You just have to show up. That's how it starts. That's how everything starts." A year later, the Heart Walker model had expanded to 3 other cities. Schools were partnering to offer credit for time spent with the elderly. Mental health studies showed dramatic improvements not just for seniors, but for the teens themselves. In one quiet facility in Chicago, a young girl read her college essay to a man with Alzheimer's. In Los Angeles, a boy from a broken home helped an old woman record her memoirs. In Miami, an ex-foster youth braided the hair of a blind pianist and promised to play her favorite song at her funeral. Ripples. Lily received letters from across the country. One read, "My grandfather died yesterday. Your program was the only reason he smiled in his final year. Thank you." Another, "I used to think I had no future. Now I want to be a nurse. My partner, Mr. Lee, told me every day, 'You matter.' I believe him now." Another still, "My mom volunteers here now. We do it together. She used to be afraid of dying. Not anymore." On the 5th anniversary of the Heart Walker Center, a gala was held in the hospital's old conference hall. Walter was there, older but sharp, dancing slowly with a cane. Lily stood on stage, and spoke her final speech of the night. This started because I was a girl who broke into a hospital. I didn't know then that I was breaking into my future. I didn't know that every story I heard would become a thread in something stronger, or that the man I pretended to love would become the one who showed me what love really was. This center is proof that even when the world forgets you, you can still be remembered. Not because you were powerful, not because you were loud, but because you were seen. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Walter stood beside her, took the mic, and added one last line. And because someone cared enough to say, "Don't go in." Late at night, Lily sat alone in the garden of the center. Above her, stars blinked softly. She pulled out a photo, one she always kept in her wallet. It showed her, years ago, in that hospital room, holding Walter's hand as he smiled, half lost in memory. Next to him on the bed, scrawled in crayon, were the words, "You matter." She closed her eyes and whispered into the dark, "I see you, all of you." And the wind carried it gently forward to the rooms, the halls, the hearts that still waited to be remembered.